America is be true to what you said on paper.
The faith, the devotion, which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. By any means necessary.
This is America. When I started party politics, the whole idea of party politics was about how we're going to put the party before the politics. And that meant how we were going to use music and art and comedy to attract and to bring people together. And so when you see the tag, putting the party before the politics, that's the idea. Is how do we put fun before the politics? Because politics can be messy. Politics can be divisive. And what we wanted to show is that, you know, for instance, in football, I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, but you have Democrats who are Cowboy fans, you have Republicans that are Cowboy fans, you have independents like me who are Cowboy fans. Bottom line is, how do you incorporate and bring the fun to the party, and at the same time, once you get people there, we find that we have things in common. So when we started Chalkboard Conversations, the idea was, how do you put people together on a platform and get them to talk and engage in difficult conversation that they may not agree on, but if you keep them in the conversation long enough, eventually they will find some common ground. Lately, I've been asking my Democratic and Republican friends, do you think that there is somewhere in the future, some place where we're going to have some reconciliation and some coming together? And if you were listening to our podcast last week, our guest, Catherine Miranda, said, I think that within my own party, the Democratic Party, that it's so fractured that we have to work on ourselves first. Well, tonight, I'm really excited about our guest. We have Rashad Davis, who happens to be my nephew, so I'm really excited about that. But he's done a song called Dystopia, and the video, I think it sparked a lot of things for me. I hope that it sparked a lot of things for you. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about words, because throughout the song, there's the word nigger. And that can rile up people in different ways, but we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what his thought process is as a 19-year-old, recently finished first-year student at Howard University, and what his perception is of what we see that's going on today, both with the pandemic as well as with the social justice movements that are going on with Black Lives Matter. And then we're going to also talk with Dr. Delvena Thomas, and I'm really excited about that conversation, because we're going to talk about the mental aspect of this and how this is wearing and tearing on people. Because overall, you know, this in this segment, This is America, the whole idea is about where is it that we are, how is it that we are feeling. Oftentimes with the editorial, I'm sharing what my thoughts are in this process, but what I really want us to do is really be talking about how is all of this affecting all of us, and at the same time, how do we get to a solution? So with that, thank you all for listening to my editorial. Hope everybody is being safe out there. Wear your mask, and don't forget, 2020 fucking matters.
Good evening, good evening. I'm very excited about tonight's show. We are live. We are recording our podcast this evening. We've got some incredibly great guests. And I'm going to talk to you all in a few minutes about my first guest, Rashad Davis, who is my nephew. And Rashad is a second-year student at Howard University. He's in the School of Fine Arts. He is incredibly talented. And I can tell you he's talented. I'm not telling you that just because he's my nephew. I'm telling you that because he really is. And I'm interested and talking to him and seeing where it is that he's going to be going. But before we get there, we're going to show his latest video. It's called Dystopia. So we're going to kick it to that video, and then we're going to come back and we're going to be talking to Rashad Davis.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to 2020. Go, go, go!
It's come upon us, my nigga. No sense in running, my nigga, from Dystopia. Look what we've done, my nigga. Hell is upon us, my nigga. We cannot run from it, nigga. This Dystopia. Welcome to 2020. Take a picture with plenty and leave the markets empty. Mix your vodka with Henny. Nothing could be as deadly. The apocalypse upon us, nigga. Nobody was ready. This a massive bust. The fuck the masses of fuck. Shit got me looking back and wondering what happened to us. The television is yelling COVID. We screaming fuck the police. Everyone yelling POTUS. Everyone going bogus over dystopia. We really done it, my nigga. It's come upon us, my nigga. No sense in running, my nigga, from Dystopia. Look what we've done, my nigga. Hell is upon us, my nigga. We cannot run from it, nigga. This Dystopia. We really done it, my nigga. It's come upon us, my nigga. No sense in running, my nigga, from Dystopia. Look what we've done, my nigga. Hell is upon us, my nigga. We cannot run from it, nigga. This dystopia.
Society in which people lead wretched, dehumanized, fearful lives. But Rashad defines dystopia as fuck.
Ain't no more business as usual. Ain't no more living delusional. Ain't no more back to your cubicle. Ain't no more oodles and noodles and waking up thinking the shit is a movie, bro. Ain't no more ride, we losing hope. Ain't no more left to be said. Society that play the shit at the funeral. Got us looking for a new truth, trying to write a blueprint, looking for a blue pill, nigga. Praying the Lord forgave us, prayers can't save us, so we wonder who will, nigga. Dollar bills, money kills, who will burn, many will, many ill, many kill, nigga. Trying to write a blueprint, looking for a blue pill, but we know the truth is, nigga. Fuck your system, fuck your politicians, fuck your scholarships, and fuck your kids' tuition, fuck your morals, values, fuck your intuition, fuck your inhibitions, fuck your inhibitions, fuck your conscience, we godless, blasphemous. If it has to be rapturous, then rapture us, nigga. Ash to action, dust to dust, nigga.
This is how the prophets answer us, nigga.
Ain't no more business as usual. Ain't no more living delusional. Ain't no more back to your cubicle. Ain't no more oodles and noodles and waking up thinking the shit is a movie, bro. Ain't no more ride, we losing hope. Ain't no more left to be said. Society that play the shit at the funeral. Dystopia!
Wow. Awesome, amazing. Rashad, thank you so much for being with me this evening.
Thank you for
How
having
are you? You're out there in Illinois, and you're a second-year student, and I want our audience to get to know you a little bit, and then I want to talk about your video. So just, could you share, you grew up, you were born here in DC area, you moved to Illinois, and then you came back to go to Howard University. What was your first year of school like?
It was definitely a transitional period in my life. It was a lot of me trying to figure out, how to navigate a new environment, how to navigate a new reality for myself. It was a lot of growth. It was a lot of new responsibilities that I had, and there was a lot of new ways of thinking that I was exposed to in being there. So I think that there was a lot of ups and downs, but I think around the second semester, things started to really click for me, and I'm excited to go back.
So now tell everyone what you're studying in school and why.
I am an acting major, and I'm studying acting, quite frankly, because I love acting. I feel like ultimately I want to be a multi-hyphenate artist. I want to not just make music, I want to act, and I want to write poems, and I want to direct videos and write films, and I want to just do everything. So I think that when I was thinking about what I wanted to study, it was like, what do I want what do I want to major in? And I was teetering between music and acting, but with music, it was like I was asking myself if I wanted to major in music, and with acting, it was like I told myself, and it was a crystal clear decision. So that's why I decided to study acting, and I really do have a deep passion for that craft. So.
And how long have you been doing your music?
I've been making music for about 5 years, going on 6 years at this point.
And when we started, when I was trying to introduce in terms of how do I introduce you, it was, do I introduce you as a rapper? Do I introduce you as an artist? How do you define yourself?
I define myself as a creative, honestly.
Okay, all right.
I'm not gonna ever tell anyone that I'm not a rapper, that I'm not an actor, that I'm not a director, that I'm not any of these things. But I would call myself a creative before calling myself any of those other things.
So, first off, I really liked the video. I remember when you first sent us the song and we listened to it, the first thing that caught, I think, all of us, my co-host, was we kept thinking, well, there's a lot of the N-word in it. Mm. And then you put together, but I still thought that the song personally was good. When I saw the video, it really kind of explained, at least it seemed like it explained some of what was a thought process. Give us an idea. What was the thought process for you in terms of coming up with this song, the lyrics, the imagery that you have in the video?
So I think that I wanted it first and foremost to be vulgar. I think that a lot of people use cursing and use vulgarity as a crutch. I think that the language with which I speak and the language that I use is advanced enough that I don't need to. But at the same time, I wanted it to be vulgar because I wanted to sort of paint this image of this gratuitous thing. So when I was filming the video and when I was writing the song, I was trying to really, really hammer in the fact that this stuff is really, excuse my French, fucked up. And I can't just say it's messed up, because if something's once something gets to the point where it's fucked up, then it's it's a whole other conversation that we're having. And so that's really what I wanted to sort of emulate. And then with the video, when we look at the images that I chose to use, I was trying to find images that were really gripping to me, images that made me feel something. And I wanted it to feel like a sensory overload. That's really what I was trying to do with it. And that's what I was trying to do with the song. That's what I was trying to do with everything that I was doing. I wanted to make something that was just just dark and gripping. But I wasn't trying to make something that was edgy. I wanted to make sure that I was speaking about the things that I'm talking about in the song, and I was trying to make sure that I was making a statement about the things. And I remember when I was leaving Howard, I was talking to myself, and I was like, this really feels like a dystopia right now. And that's what made me decide to make the song. It feels like we're in a dystopian reality, and I didn't want to sugarcoat it as if it was like, oh, this is no, this is really, really, really it really does feel like the end of the world in a lot of ways. And I don't think that it will be, but it feels like it will be. And that feeling is what I was trying to capture with the song.
So every week we have people that are closer to my age. You are by far the youngest person that we've had on the show. I'm looking forward to seeing some of your other artistic talent and bringing you back on. But while we have you right here, tell us, so as a 19-year-old, you're saying that it feels like it's the end of the world. Where do you see, because let me kind of give you a little bit of backdrop too. And I feel like my generation, and for lack of a better word, we fucked up. We left you with our baggage. You all are inheriting that. And I keep saying to young people when I talk to you, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we have put this on you. I am also optimistic, especially when I see your work and I see the work of other young people and hear their voices, that we are going to be okay. We just have to go through a really, really messed up period to get there. But from your vantage point, what do you see of the world and where do you see us going? I mean, have you ever experienced racism? And if you have, could you share that?
In terms of whether or not I've experienced racism, yes. I mean, on a myriad of different levels, just given the fact that I live in a white conservative town. I think that it's less, it's more often than not less just direct racism and more about little things that people don't notice until they notice them. The way the police officers look at me as they drive past me, different things like that. And then as far as what direction I feel like I see the world going in, I don't think that this is the end of the world. That's not what I don't want to say that. What I will say is that the things that I'm seeing to me seem like they're indicative of what I think the end of the world will be. And that's when I look at the way that people reacted, like with the whole virus and with how everything's going. It's like things are only sort of just coming to a head. And this year is a really interesting year with everything happening at once. On top of that, we live in a society where there's such immense exposure, especially for people in my generation, what with social media, what with everything. It's like as soon as something happens, we know what's happening. We're watching in real time from our houses, from our screens. We're seeing these things happening in a way that no one ever has before, no other group of people has before. And so the way that I feel when I look at these things, it's like if the world was ending, like, would I be able to distinguish between that and this? That's kind of how it feels. And I'm not saying that the world is ending, but I'm saying that when I say that this is indicative of what the end of the world will be, it's like, look at how people are treating this. Look at how people are treating this virus in America. Look at how systemically people have treated the police and how people have treated Black people. Look systemically how all these things have happened, and look at how things are starting to come to a head. Because I don't think that it gets better without getting significantly worse. And I'm not sure if we as a society can handle it getting significantly worse, given the way that we're responding to this right here. And so I'm not saying that we can't. I'm just saying that I'm not sure if we can. And that's when it starts to feel like a dystopian reality.
So I'm going to ask you one more question. Then we're going to bring on Dr. Thomas, and then we'll bring you back in for a bigger conversation. But so Dystopia, where are you going now? What's your next project? What are the next things that we should be looking for?
I am releasing an EP called Dystopia the Prelude at the end of the month.
What's an EP?
It's an extended play, so it's like a short album. And after I release the EP, I'm going to be releasing my album at some point, hopefully later this year, but I'm not going to talk too much about that because we're not there yet,
Okay.
And on top of that, just content. I'm just going to continue to be making content. I'm always making new things, Right now, it's less of a question of what am I going to put forth next and more of a question of what am I going to make next. So, I'm excited to see what happens.
Well, I'm excited to have you with us. I'm excited to have you come and be a part of this conversation in the next round with our co-host. Just give us a few minutes. We're going to talk to Dr. Delvena Thomas. She is a psychologist, and we're going to talk about race in America. There is a lot of things that are going on right now that we've been talking about viruses. We've been talking about George Floyd. There's so many different pieces and parts of this. But Dr. Thomas, how are you?
I'm well. How's it going?
I'm good. How's it going with you?
I'm making it down here in the hot spot in Florida.
Yeah, tell us. I mean, I know we want to go into some other things, but I think today that Florida just hit 300,000 cases.
300,000?
I think it was. I think that's what I heard, but maybe not.
302,000. It's 302,000.
Yeah, 302,000. Thank you, Earl. Dr. Thomas, you're right there in the hot spot. We've got this virus that's plagued the world. And yet we also have racism, which feels like another virus that's been plaguing this country for over 400 years. Mm-hmm. Tell us, from your work, your thoughts, your perspective in terms of the psychological effects, both of racism, especially in this time of this pandemic. We saw what happened with 8 minutes and 46 seconds of a police officer holding his knee down on George Floyd. And then the aftermath of what that created in terms of people who were shut in, who all of a sudden came out and started protesting. And we saw the effects of that and all of this spread around the world. What are your thoughts and what are you hearing from some maybe your patients and just what is your perception of the lay of the land right
Well, I'm a psychiatrist, so just.
I'm sorry, I'm a psychiatrist. I'm so sorry. Thank you for correcting me.
No problem. And so in my private practice, actually, most of our patients are minorities. We have a handful of patients who are white or Caucasian, and it seems that their sentiments are in line with everyone else in the country, meaning people are finally understanding why Black Americans have the perception that they do regarding discrimination and racism in America. Basically, long story short, they finally see that it's actually a problem. It took those 8 minutes and 46 seconds for them to buy into it, which is, you know, I think a lot of us are befuddled when you ask what are people thinking? I think a lot of us we're feeling a lot of emotions, the shock, we're feeling enraged. I'm sure most of us are befuddled that after so many killings of Black women and men, it actually took the murder 8 minutes and 46 seconds of everyone watching this man die underneath the knee of someone who was supposed to protect and serve. So the paranoia, the hypervigilance, those things are appropriate in this situation. People are scared. I think I've seen more Black folks go to the gun range than ever before. I've seen more people talk about owning concealed weapons permits. I've seen more Black women going to the range to learn how to shoot. And I think it's because we all realize that this could be an Armageddon. And we're not overreacting. You know, this is a time where this is not an overreaction to what's happening in our country. And I think a lot of this, you know, is tied into the politics also. I was out one day and I saw some folks on the corner supporting Trump. And in their support for Trump, they had signs supporting Trump, but they also had signs of no mask. And they also had signs of supporting police officers. So psychologically, people have tied together the sentiments that seem to be anti-Black or anti-minority or anti-ethnic. They've tied these three things together. So Trump is associated with anti-Black. Not wearing a mask is actually subconsciously associated with anti-Black because, remember, more of us have COVID-19 than the majority, AKA white folks. More of us are dying from COVID-19. So this has become a Black virus, a Black disease. It's killing more of us because we already had healthcare disparities. So not wearing a mask is anti-Black subconsciously. And then supporting police officers during a time when, and this is something that I saw about 3 weeks ago or a month ago. So the protests and the marches and things like that, those things were still hot. And so these people were out, all of them were white, including some biker gangs, and they were all, you know, they had all three of those things there, and not wearing a mask, supporting the police, and supporting Trump. So these things have merged together as an anti-racial effort, if you will.
So, you know, it's interesting you say that. You mentioned a couple of things. For instance, health disparities. And I think I've worked in the field of healthcare for a long time. And we've been talking about this issue of health disparities for a long time. Right now, I think is a good time for us to be talking about how the pressures of society create the high blood pressure, create the hypertension, create, you know, all these things, the psychological pressures of just walking around in a color skin. And then, you know, so then I look at it. So a couple of weeks ago, I was at the grocery store, social distancing, looking at vegetables, trying to pick them out, about six inches away from the vegetables and reaching out. And I saw a white guy walk over to me. I saw him look at me out of the corner of my eye. And then I saw him walk as if he didn't see me to go to his vegetable, which meant that he had to walk right across me. Mm-hmm. I backed away. I said, "Excuse you," not under my breath, loud enough for him to see me. He picked up what he said. He took 2 steps away from me, turned around and started shouting, "I'm sorry I was in your fucking way. I'm sorry I was in your way. I'm sorry. He just kept going. And I thought, okay, well, that's okay. You lose your dignity. But apparently the pressures now of you recognizing that your privilege is slowly, maybe quickly slipping away seems to be doing a whole nother job on the mentality of some of these people. When you think about what we saw in Michigan with people armed going into the Michigan state capitol. Now, there's no way that we as Blacks could go into the state capitol with guns and not have either been shot, arrested, dead, etc. But it is really interesting to see this switch. But and I won't even say that it's a switch because it still hasn't taken away the pressures that many of us experience on a day-to-day basis. But it is interesting to see how this idea, it feels like that people feel as if they're losing their privilege and their entitlement, and that is causing them to put themselves in harm's way by not wearing a mask, that it is putting them into this whole really drawing the line of being anti-racial. And it does go back to the president in terms of the rhetoric that he has talked about since he came into office, whether or not it was about Mexicans and immigrants, et cetera. But from your expertise and in terms of how and what you're talking to people, what is it that our audience and people who may not go to a psychologist, what is it that we can be doing that might help us in terms of some of our mental dilemma as it relates to this, as well as what is it that you would advise as a patient, who's dealing with these type of things? What is it that what are the courses and what's the way forward?
So I'll say this first. For my patients, this conversation ain't new for us, right? We all been Black since the day we were born. And so I have my therapist and I, because it's not just me, it's a team of clinicians who provide services to folks. And oftentimes, especially with Black women, the racial, the discrimination, those things are always present in some of our sessions because it's difficult to be Black in America. So these are things that we've been processing all along, prior to all of the killings and murders of Black men and women by law enforcement officers. So now what we talk about, the ongoing dialogue is, okay, how do we extend the reach to the next generation? How are we talking to, what's the strategy in dealing with and talking to our children? How do we help to educate them and then help them to cope with the climate in America so that they're not traumatized? Because transgenerational and historical traumas are real. Vicarious traumas are real. So our children seeing all of this stuff now on social media and television, I can recall a time when I wouldn't see anything on TV unless it was time for Martin Luther King's birthday or Black History Month, right? So in America, we didn't have all those movies to watch until it was like January, February, that time point. But now this is happening, the killings, on a regular basis. Every month, there's someone in some city somewhere or some cities where Blacks are being targeted and attacked and killed. So that's the new discussion is, okay, how do we protect our children? How do we prevent our children from developing PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, from developing anxieties and acute stress disorder because of what's happening in the country? One of the things that we talk about, the first question you asked me is, well, how do we all cope with this? You have to empower yourself. You have to have a strong support system. They have to be people who understand and appreciate that there really is something to be said for nonviolent ways of managing our issue in the country and having control of your emotions. Because when someone can call you a racial slur and can cause you to act out of character, or maybe it's not a racial slur, it's some other curse word or profanity, and it causes you to lose your cool and do something that you wouldn't ordinarily do, that person owns you. So a part of this is we have to strategize. And in strategizing, that means preparation, that means knowledge, that means education, that means empowering yourself and knowing things. There are times when I talk to, I'm actually from Maryland, and I moved to South Florida, to Miami in 2007, and would talk to folks here, Black folks. and half of them didn't know their Black history. And it's because the school system here didn't provide it, and their parents didn't teach it to them. So my parents are from Mississippi. So my brothers and I have been hearing the stories about not just Martin Luther King, but other folks in Mississippi especially. We've been learning our history since the time that we were born. I've been seeing things on television, the traumas and the police officers hosing down Black folks who are protesting, and the dogs biting on Blacks, and hangings and the lynchings, and the blood on the leaves, all that stuff. So education is important. Empowering yourself is important. Building a system of people who look like you, but then also sharing information with those who don't look like us. And I've had some people say that they're not interested in educating white folks. But really, if we don't, how do we expect change? Because see, they're not educated now. You keep doing the same thing, you don't get change. That's considered insanity. You keep doing the same thing over and over without doing something different, it's going to be the same result.
That's interesting. I'm reading a book about Frederick Douglass that my cousin Bobby shared with me. And in this beginning part of it, the author quotes Frederick Douglass quite a bit in his narrative of the slave and life and times. And the thing that he continues to talk about is the intellect. And about what it takes for an enslaver to enslave. And so even when we look at today, and you mentioned in terms of history, I know I was blessed, and my brothers and sisters, we were blessed that my mother spent a lot of time teaching us African-American history. And to know who you are and to know where you come from is a very important part in terms of trying to deal with the things that are going on, not just today, but the things that have been going on all of our lives. So with that said, Dr. Thomas, I want to ask you one more thing, and then we're going to bring in my co-host. But, we're grappling with this virus, and I feel like it's a two-pronged thing, because I feel like the virus of racism is one that could easily be solved if people would just change and decide that we were going to treat each other nice. So that could be cured. But in terms of, we also have this virus, COVID-19, that has been ravaging, unfortunately, African-American communities. And a lot of it has to do with the inability to social distance. And yet there's social distancing, there's the social isolation. A lot of people are upset because you can't travel. How do you cope with those type of things? I mean, what do you tell your patients?
You are talking to the right one, because my therapy is travel. I would go away like for a weekend, just, randomly, spontaneous. That was my therapy, to just be somewhere else. And so you got to find another therapy. I mean, prior to this, it's good to have a plan B, C, D, E, F. You got to have recourse, right? So prevention is key. Being informed is key. So I talk to patients about doing the basic things, because a lot of times patients don't know what's basic, things like getting enough sleep. Sleeping 8 hours. When we don't sleep, it actually increases our risk of developing things like depressive disorders, of getting or experiencing anxiety. So sleep is important. Drinking your water, 64 ounces or more every day, keeping your brain hydrated. It's something basic, but it's something that a lot of people don't do. And the thing is, the brain needs water. The brain is composed 70% or more of water. And so the processes that we do on a daily basis, the thinking, forming thoughts, all that stuff requires water. Your nutrition, what you eat, it doesn't just matter for you physically, it matters for you mentally. So we gotta have those brain love foods in our diets to enhance what our brain is doing. We gotta help our brain. We can't allow our brain to be tapped out. And right now our brain is like on 10,000. It's not even on 1,000. It's on 10,000 with everything that's going on, with everything in the news. People are home. There are financial issues. Just being out in the environment, it's just very bizarre and just different for everyone. It feels different. Your nephew Rashad said something. He said it feels like it's the end of the world, although I know it's not. but it feels like it. And so I want him to know a lot of people identify with that sentiment. And so doing those basic things are important. The exercise, getting out, getting fresh air. You need the sunlight, the sunshine. You can just feel it when you're outside, when that sun is beaming on you, how good it feels to your skin, to your mind, to your psyche. So all that basic stuff. And like I said before, having that strong circle, that strong layer with the way things are right now, people don't have time for the negative energy or for the folks in your life who don't mean you well. So don't waste your energy, your emotions on dealing with negativity and folks who are issues or, just not bringing you love and positivity in your life. Don't do it. So get rid of those things. This is a time to clean up. COVID-19 has allowed people to go into their homes and also go into their lives and clean up and get rid of shit. Excuse me.
I love it. I love it. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Thomas. I'm excited to have our co-hosts, Nayada, Earl, and Seldom Seen join us. And then we're going to bring back Rashad. So I'm here. All right. Hey, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
How you doing?
So wait, I just have to say, Dr. Thomas, you had me over here in chills. Like everything you were saying, you were speaking to me. So, but the one thing that really, really struck me was when you were talking about learning the history and the blood on the trees. Oh my, woo!
You need a minute, don't you?
Yeah, that was
okay.
That was rough. But you're right on point with all the tips. I appreciate that. We need to be
I'm gonna laugh, Dr. Thomas. Before, earlier today we did a run through, and I told Nayada that I wanted her to be the first one when we came on the co-host, and Nayada's like, "No, I wanted to be organic. No, I don't want it to be scripted." And yet here she comes right off the bat. She has something to say. So thank you, Dr. Thomas, making my plan work. But now on that, Earl, what are your thoughts?
Number one, I think mental health is something that we as a community have seen as a luxury, and thought that was something that other people could afford, and that when you start looking at it as something you can't afford not to take an interest in, then it's a different thing culturally. But businesses suffer when people start thinking in survival mode and how do they pay bills based on their business decisions. I don't think lives are very much different. I think just like you mentioned, the smallest details that you can do to make yourself more mentally productive help you with more elements of your health than you're aware of. So good. Thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you for even being able to talk about it on shows like this so that you can actually get that message out.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes, sir. Seldom. I know you got something to say.
Well, as a person who's been through any number of years of therapy, I want to thank you, first of all, for actually being the speaker box to some of the experiences I've had. One of the big things, in advance of you coming on, you kind of have a concept that I'm very fascinated about called brain love. And I think you kind of laid out some parameters individually in terms of how we have to take care of our brain, how that we have to nurture it. But one of the things that was so fascinating, you said that's so powerful right now, is that take yourself on a journey or an adventure just for a day to unlock the stress of the things that are kind of going on. I thought that was so profound because I've been telling everybody I have Southern roots and experiences. It's like we're living like our grandparents did in the 1950s and 60s. We can go some places, we just can't go everywhere, and we have to be mindful of where we go. And that's a point of joy and pride that we're able to get in a car and go somewhere and do something that's fulfilling, but also enriching. My one question I've always been fascinated by, Dr. Thomas, is that the concept of PTSD in our children. And as you kind of alluded to their variations of, being transferred and things like that. But I really think that kids are consuming so much information now, and they're going through so much now. Any tips on how to support a child who's been through a traumatic experience?
Well, I would say take them to therapy if you can. And if you're in the city or, if you're in a town where they have a community mental health center. So let's say that you don't have health insurance, you don't have the money. Typically, there's community mental health centers near the major cities like, Washington, D.C. We have several down here in South Florida and Baltimore. I mean, a lot of places have these community centers. I would say take your child for professional therapy because as a parent, as much as you love your baby, you are not a professional and you don't know what needs to be said. And most people don't know how to guide someone through a traumatic experience, especially depending on your child rearing style, because sometimes parents get angry with their children if they're not responding the way that they think they should, or people say things that they don't realize can make someone regress or set someone back after they've had a trauma. Like, I don't see why you just can't get over it. That's a common thing that people say to children who have gone through something that they perceive to be traumatic. So the first step is taking them to see a mental health professional, even if you don't think there's anything wrong, because sometimes our children will not talk to us. They won't disclose those things. It happens often. And I'll just sort of include something personal here. For me, I'm divorced. My son's father and I, we divorced when he was in 5th grade or so. And I thought, he doesn't need to go to therapy to process this. He'll be okay because his father loves him. I love him. He has his grandparents. He'll be okay. But that's something that I could have done, and I didn't identify it. And so he and I have a very good relationship. We talk about everything. And so today he's 24, and even prior to now, with talking and processing life stuff, we talk about what he was like when his father and I were going through that divorce. And so if I could share something with someone, I would say things that seem like they're basic and they're easy to do. We know children are resilient. If it's a life change, like a relationship change, take your kids to see a professional. Just do it. Check the box on that.
Let me bring Rashad in. Hey, Rashad. So, in terms of like with your music, and Dr. Thomas, I know over the years I've heard about, how music and art or other things in terms of art can help young people, or maybe even adults, in terms of being able to express themselves. Rashad, do you feel that with your music that it's your way of being able to express? Is it like anger? Is it like frustration? Does your creative side benefit from those emotions?
I think that it does. I think that honestly, when I look at art, when I look at the kind of things that I like to create, I think in terms of the fact that when it comes to just making stuff and when it comes to making things, like I'm trying to capture the human experience. And so, like, especially when I'm making stuff that's personal for myself, I'm trying to make stuff that I'm trying to always make things that reflect how I feel, honestly. And so, like, it's really interesting to experience things, and it's really interesting to use music as an outlet to sort of reflect these things and to sort of see where I'm at. And then it's interesting listening back to old music that I made and seeing, where I was at just mentally in terms of a specific space and seeing how things sort of evolved. I think that art as an outlet for people is a really good thing, because there's not really any other space in contemporary society where we can just be all the way ourselves and put forth 100% of ourselves in terms of the way that we think and the way that we feel. And so I think that art is a really good release for a lot of people, and it has been for me, definitely.
And another question. So your friends, what are they, do they feel the same way as you do? What are some of the ways, if they're not, artistically inclined, what are some of the ways that you see that they express themselves?
It's interesting. A good amount of my friends are artistically inclined because I surround myself with actors and rappers and just people like that. And that's often how they do it. But it's interesting when you look at my friends who are artistically inclined and my friends that aren't artistically inclined, the ones that are tend to just be more open with everything in terms of the way that they communicate. Whereas the ones that aren't, there's sort of some reservations around that. And so when you look at that, when you look at the differences between those things, I feel like being artistically inclined and being able to do art based on my observation allows people to, just open themselves up and allows them to really like expose themselves to the world. There's something freeing about that, I think.
Okay, so to the panel, Rashad mentioned earlier that he talked about the vulgarity that he used, and there was a purpose to it. What were your thoughts? One, of the video then also what are your thoughts about, its use in entertainment, in terms of, what we see culturally that's going on today?
Well, if I can jump in right here. So Rashad, I'm very proud of you. I love the video. I love the song. It was great. I mean, sad, unfortunately, but I mean, I think it captured what we're experiencing. I mean, and you had the latest video of the guy riding past on the golf cart. I mean, like, so you're really up on the times. But it's funny because when I first watched it and I sent it to some of my friends, they were like, "Oh, that looks like your son. Is that your son?" So you look like my son. He also is a musical artist. He's an artist. But I find it, I feel like your generation is a lot more willing to be artists. I think, a lot like my generation and before me, I feel like we were discouraged from being artists because it wasn't enough money in it. We didn't, but I feel like your generation is more open and willing to be an artist, and thusly, like you said, being more free. So Atiba asked about the use of the N-word. I didn't have a problem. I didn't have a problem with any of the language in it. I mean, that's just me. I curse a lot. They used to say
yeah.
But it's interesting though, because I don't use the N-word as much as I used to. I pull back from that, and not for any definitive purpose. Like, I don't think it's very helpful, but I don't think it's as hurtful as a lot of people try to say that it is. I just choose not to use it as much. But
you know what I'm about to say, right?
What?
Nigga, please.
I know it. But
there's nothing you can do about that, joke. It's just going to keep coming.
To you, here's my question to you, Rashad. Using that word around white people, like, I mean, what's your perspective on that?
I mean, I don't know. I have a much smaller circle of white people around me right now than I once did at a point. I have a very close white friend that's and beyond that doesn't really go much farther than that. But when it comes to the way that I interact around white people, I think that there's a lot of things that I don't even try to do in terms of the way that I just switch the way that I communicate versus when I communicate with black people in terms of just the language that I use, the way that it's like we people talk about code switching and stuff.
Absolutely.
And that's not a thing that I consciously do, because it's not a thing, because I don't have any issue being in a group of white people acting as the way that I do around the people that I around at Howard and vice versa. It's not really a conscious thing. It's just a thing that kind of like happens. So I don't think that I necessarily tend to use the N-word as much around white people, because it's not really just the way that I've conditioned myself to communicate around them. However, when it comes to my music and when it comes to like the way that I express myself, I'm not going to ever hold back from expressing myself in a certain way. That's the thing. That's just a rule for me almost. And when it comes to the way that I want people to interact with me, there's a really interesting conversation surrounding the N-word. Like if you go even, and it's not a new thing. If you go back to the 1980s with Tribe Called Quest, Q-Tip, Suck a Nigga, all that stuff, like it's not a new conversation that we're having around the N-word. But when it comes to how I feel about it, it's like, I feel like we really did take a thing that was used and weaponized against us and made it a thing that is for us, by us. And so that's more than any other reason why I don't tend to use it around white people, because it's not really like me using it is not really for you. I'm not really like y'all ain't my niggas, if that makes any sense.
One of the can I jump in?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. One of the things, I know I'm supposed to be last on everything after this morning's call, but I'm gonna try to hope Earl give me like a second of his. Rashad, I'm sorry.
Don't make me reclaim my time
right now. Yeah.
He's talking over himself.
You can't cough in America right now, but hearing that maybe I am so sorry. I'm glad we got a doctor on the call. But hearing this makes me think
I'm glad we're virtual and I'm not sitting next to you.
Right. I was gonna
trust me. I'm in the booger basement. Trust me. I'm in the booger basement right now. Real quick, but Rashad, when I heard it, I thought about Dick Gregory's book, Nigger, in terms of it being a catalyst word for his generation to bring people into a conversation, broader conversation in the 50s about race and the impacts and things like that to even now. But I'm also marveling at your generation that you've eliminated the middleman because you now know how to manipulate technology to get your art out to people as quickly as possible, where you're building a brand, you're building an audience, but you're also liberating people's thoughts about what they're going through as an expressive and as a creative. One of the things that I would ask you, as you know, kind of building around the same question someone asked a second ago, how do you govern yourself in terms of when do you use the word, in what setting, and are you using the word in a certain type of context? Are you joking with your friends in the dorm? Are y'all out front on the quad? Are you all, what's happening and how is it being exchanged amongst your peer group?
I think that it's kind of just, in terms of the way that I interact with my friends, I feel like there's not really as much of a weight when it comes to the way that I interact with my friends. And that's under the pretense that most of my friends are Black. So when it comes to me, when I'm with my white friends, I don't think that I ever really use the word necessarily. Like, it's not a thing that's not a part of the way that I communicate with them. And so I make it a point not to, unless for whatever reason I'm making a point and it's necessary, and it's a necessary piece of the point that I'm trying to make. In terms of like the way that I govern myself in terms of when I use the word, I feel like I govern it myself in the same way that I govern myself when I use any profanity, because there is definitely situations and points and places where it's not appropriate for me to curse. And me being a person who does just in my daily life use curse words, like it's not like a thing where I'm afraid to, like, where I really censor myself. And I think there is a conversation to be had about censorship and about the weight that just words have in general. But as far as when I use specific words, I feel like there's just a time and a place. And then when we look at my music, I don't think that my music is necessarily, I've never really viewed my music as a place where it was not appropriate, because I feel like my music I don't feel like I look at my music as a formal thing, as a formal, space. I look at my music rather as a space where I'm just communicating how I feel about just, things. And so, and again, and this is not to sound like it's less intentional than it is, but when I think about who I'm talking to in these songs, when I think about who I'm communicating with, is people who look like me.
Okay.
Right. Dr. Thomas, what are some of your thoughts in terms of the psychological impact of slurs and the N-word?
I think it depends on which generation you're talking to. The N-word has been an appellation of endearment for a lot of Black folks across generations. Even older Black folk use the N-word as a way to love on someone. We use it in so many different connotations. We use it in the place of a curse word. It's considered profanity at times. It's used to show love. And I think really the secret use of the word, or the underlying meaning, the real meaning of the word, which is why we all prefer to use it amongst with the majority, is that it ties a history together. We know the origins of the word. We know how it came about. And I think oftentimes when people use it, it's a way to say we're strong. I know some folks would disagree with me, but when Black people use the N-word amongst themselves, we will not use it with a white person because they don't have that privilege. They don't have the history that we had. They weren't beat and thrown in jails and prisons and, washed with hoses, and they weren't slaves. And so that's the secret connotation of the word also. But then for others, they detest it because they feel that because of that history, we should not want to mimic that type of language. So I guess it just depends on who you're talking to, their generation, what their exposure has been, because I find more older people are offended when you use it. I'll give you an example. I post a lot of stuff on my social media because I like to be authentic. And whether it's profanity or using the N-word, whatever, but someone made a meme and it said something to the effect of, to all the chicks out there who curved a nigga, look where you are now, And I thought that was the funniest thing ever. That was like a year ago. I thought it was funny. I mean, and the people who commented thought it was funny too. It had like several hundred comments, but one of the older physicians here who I consider a mentor, she responded and said, "You shouldn't want to use that word." And so I tagged another physician where I stole it from. And I said, "Look what you did. You caused this nonsense." So I pulled him into it and I was just like, well, so that's just what it is. Sometimes older people detest using that word. So
it's funny though, because I know like my parents' generation, they used it all the time. I mean, still do. But so I think it's a certain groups.
Yeah, my parents to this day won't use it in the house.
Yeah, my mom
and
never
you don't use it in the house when my parents are there. Like it's just a respect thing.
She hated
and I grew up hearing it, and it was always said kind of like the way I just said it to Nayada, which is the reason why I say it that way. And I don't really say it, but I said it that way, and I said it that way tonight on our recording of our podcast for a reason, because it's not just Black people that are out there that are watching us, and I think that for us, in terms of this day and time, it's really important for us to be expressive and be as freaking, I was going to say fucking, but I think my mother and my father are watching.
They've seen
they've seen my shirts. But just be as expressive as you can, and be undeniable and be unforgiving in terms of being Black, because I think that we've got to really, I asked a question on a post this week about should history books be changed to mimic and to show that slavery, the act of slavery, was a crime. It was really interesting to hear back what people were saying. They were like, well, the law and this and whatever. And, I'm sorry, I'm just going to be like this. When I see Black people say stuff like that, I automatically go, you just a freaking Okotom. Okay? You're that epitome of what we thought of the house Negro, the house nigger. The one who's like, oh, the house is burning. Oh, massa, our house is burning. Oh, massa, you sick? Oh, massa, we sick. Come on.
Wait, I'm sorry. So what are you saying, that we should rewrite books to show that it's against?
I think that we should rewrite it. We should definitely rewrite the books and call slavery what it was.
But I disagree with you.
Well, I'm gonna say why. I say that we should. Well, I'm gonna tell you this: it should be rewritten. And
why?
Even if you don't go back and call slavery a crime, you can call the kidnapping of the human beings who were snatched and stolen from Africa to be brought here to work.
Why you don't do that?
Hold on a second. That was a kidnapping. Kidnapping has historically always been considered a crime. And the reason why I say it from this standpoint is, in order to change the trajectory in terms of how we think and the way that other people think, we're going to have to look and think outside the box. We can't continue to be within this box of how we were educated to act, educated to be, educated to follow a law. Because if you look at the laws have always been changed in order to fix us, to put us back in a box. And we never were supposed to be in a box. You talked about earlier, Dr. Thomas, that you have more patients who are Black and men and women who are going to gun ranges. Well, you don't think they're going to soon change the gun laws? You don't think that the reason why people are going to get guns is not just because they see that there's an Armageddon that's coming, but you'll start to see policies begin to change. You'll start to see how you can register and get guns is going to change. The more that we're buying guns, that's going to happen. I mean, whenever I think about Philando Castile, who was following the law, when he informed the police officer that he had a concealed carry permit, and the officer didn't even allow him to pull the permit, he shot him. the reality is this idea in America of slavery is still in the DNA of all of us. And until we change the language, and still we start calling what slavery was, it was a crime against humanity. Until we start talking about it from that standpoint, we're never going to be able to get to right the ship to be able to even talk about the fact of the 400 years and what that has meant and how that has been degrading to people in this country.
Atiba, I think
yes.
We need to change the history books to show the history. Because it's a lot of history books that don't even, they have us as workers.
Or that we were happy. They shot them on the field, so they must have been happy.
But one of the things that you always have to remember is that what states purport as being history is often a political decision. The largest consumer of textbooks in America is the state of Texas, which has very stringent guidelines on exactly how they regard Texas history. So Juneteenth gets probably 1 or 2 pages in a Texas history book, and it's taught in a very distant foreign concept. So if you want to change what's in your child's history books, you have to begin to work at the state legislative session in the state capitals to really kind of advance what history really is. But history has been used as a tool to manage Black folks away from the truth of what their role has been in America thus far, to keep us as consumers, to keep us as that thing. But as Dr. Thomas said, if you know your history, then sometimes history is not left up to a school teacher, it's left up to the family to teach it and for you to understand it and for understand the origins of where you come from. Dr. Thomas, you mentioned that your parents are from Mississippi, but you grew up in Maryland. What kind of life lessons did you had as you moved from Maryland back down to Mississippi in the summers or something like that, where you had to modulate who you were, how you interacted, how you did exchanges kind of moving between Mississippi and Maryland for the summer, if you had that opportunity to share with us?
Well, first I'll say this.
Yes, ma'am.
The history needs to be told the way it is. These people brought us here and enslaved us, and it wasn't unlawful because they're despicable. And so that's why I say we don't change the history books to show that it was unlawful because
it wasn't even a crime to them at the time.
It wasn't
even a crime. And they were okay with it not being a crime.
So,
Dr.
I'm
Thomas,
sorry, I waited.
Dr. Thomas, you said
I waited patiently.
You said they took them.
Me too.
You said they took them as if they took them like they were like, okay, we're just going to come take you. No, they kidnapped them. They stole them. They stole their lives from them.
But Atiba, hold on one second. Let me try. But Atiba, I think her point, and this is one I can't agree with.
Y'all putting a muzzle on the psychiatrist.
No. Well, all I was going to say is just what I hear you saying is the idea that while it is wrong and ethically diabolical, what I think the point we're trying to make is it wasn't illegal at the time, and that's how wrong it was. It was so wrong that the system supported them.
It's not illegal. It wasn't illegal to do a chokehold in New York, but was it not a crime?
Well, murder is a crime. Murder of us is not.
And I want to add one little point before y'all pass by me.
Go for it.
KKK exists on police forces and courtrooms. They're everywhere. So it does not, the fact that he had a concealed weapons permit, none of those things ever matter. When they come to kill, they're going to kill. And that's the problem that we have, that these mofos are disguised as police officers and judges. People thought I was crazy when I said it 10 years ago, but it's obvious. The KKK has created a strategy where they dip into different careers and arenas so that they can still oppress Black folk. And that's how they've been able to do it. They're district attorneys, they're public defenders who don't really defend their client in court, they're judges. So those things are going to continue to happen as long as they're able to infiltrate and get into these jobs, into these careers, into these places. To answer your question, seldom as fuck, I didn't grow up in Maryland. I was an Army brat, so I lived in different places, and racism has affected me in every place I lived. I was born in Kansas. I lived in New Jersey. I was in pre-K when I experienced racism for the first time. Then we moved to Germany. We lived in Germany for 5 years where I experienced racism. A man ran over me with his bike, a white older man, because I was Black. And so then I went to Maryland, where the KKK is huge. You guys are in DC, you know this, in Cecil County and stuff. And so racism has always been prevalent in my life, not even because I was in Mississippi. And yes, when we went back home, I would be scared as hell because we would usually drive from Jersey, Kansas, those types of places. And the roads, my parents were from the poorest area of Mississippi, Jonestown and Clarksdale. They didn't have lights on the street. So I would think about movies I saw where Black people got pulled over and killed. So that's why I say transgenerational and historical traumas are real.
Yeah, Michael, I want to bring you back
into the conversation because I know and then we're going to wrap the show and get to our lightning round. But, from I'm not going to say your age again, but, you're definitely the youngest one on the panel. What are your thoughts about what we're talking about in terms of the history and how should it be told?
I think it's interesting because I think that the history book should definitely be rewritten. To be rewritten as if it was a crime is an interesting question, because the question then becomes, are we going to rewrite the history to say that they were doing things that are illegal, or are we going to rewrite the history that they were doing things that were illegal? Because those are two different conversations. Furthermore, I would say that it's worth noting that I think that even though I think that they should retell the history to really truly express what actually happened, I don't think that I can really expect that from them. That's the thing about the society is we look at how everything is set up, and we look at when we talk about how there's KKK in the police force, how there's KKK just in the system. I would go as far as to say that the entire system that we have set up in America is just by structure and by the way it's created anti-Black. And so because of that, it's hard for me to expect that they're going to tell us, to give us information that we need to know to understand what our history, because for us to know our history makes us that much more dangerous. Because I think that James Baldwin said something. I don't want to misquote him, but so I'm paraphrasing. But he said to be a Negro and to be relatively conscious is to be constantly in a state of
rage.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Hey, I'm gonna let Earl. You haven't said too much tonight. I'm gonna let you have the last word on the panel, and then we're gonna go to our lightning round.
Okay, a couple of quick things. Just because you touched on a lot of things, I'm a creative as well. I recorded albums. Brother, I feel where you're coming from, especially at that age. It's the combination of being invulnerable and all the energy to do whatever you want to. And for some reason, God just gave everybody 3 months to just sit and stew and come out to the world with whatever they came up with, which is great. I will say that the video put the song in perspective in a way that the song on its own didn't. For me, I can't speak for everybody else. I'm just saying for me, the video put everything, it put everything in focus in a way that I needed because I came from that world. The first thing I always think of when I hear language is, can I put it in drive time? Can I put it, can I get somebody to listen to it who's got money to put behind projects? I know promoters here in DC that are always trying to find artists. And so when I hear it, I'm always listening, who can I make a phone call to help this brother connect to? And then I start thinking about the number of people I can call goes down when I hear certain things. And with this video, I would actually take it straight to art houses. I would bypass the music industry and just take it straight as an installation piece, straight to where it needs to go. Think galleries, think Fridays, Saturday nights open. That's where I feel like the impact that you're making and the circle that's there. But yeah, at first when I heard it, I was like, that hook is a little aggressive. and it makes perfect sense with the video. So great job, man. Really good job.
I don't want to take up a whole lot of time because I know that y'all are trying to rap. I want to say that when I was making the song, it's hard for me to make music from a perspective of what will people like, what will be like, what will get me on, because I don't really think that I make music for that. No. I think that ultimately what I was trying to make, and that's why I made the video the way that I did, you got me walking around, stumbling around, spitting the blood out my mouth, images of like all these different things happening. I'm trying to make stuff that is disruptive. I'm not really trying to, specifically with this song, I'm not trying to entertain as much as I'm trying to disrupt.
Fair.
And so that's why I went the route that I did. Wanted to be aggressive. I wanted to be polarized.
Oh yeah.
Hear it and feel something. Like I don't care. I couldn't care less if you hear it and you love it, or if you hear it and it hates you and the images are jarring. I remember I was asking my friends to post a video on their story, and this one girl was just like, "No, I think the images are a little too violent for my feed and stuff like that."
Real life.
And I think that that's ultimately what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, I want people to see it and feel something.
Agreed. And by the way, I'm not telling you what to create. Atiba, jump off. I was not telling you what to create. What I'm trying to say is that by nature, who I am, when I hear something, I immediately think of who I can connect you with. Like that's, Atiba says, okay, this is my nephew. All right, that's all I need, really. All right, who can I call? And then 2 minutes into it, 1 minute into it, I'm like, oh, okay, well. And after seeing the video, now that's an art house thing. That's a completely different place where it's some place where people are going to be punched in the gut and come away with some new understanding of something. And that's so much different than calling up an A&R friend being like, hey, give this a listen. And with the art that you've created, the visual, the whole experience, it makes perfect sense. So I'm not telling you how to create it. What I'm trying to tell you is that I don't know how not to try to find a connect for somebody if I hear something. Dude, I hear a lot of stuff that doesn't need to get connected to anybody.
And I think that's a great one. Rashad, that's a great way in terms of describing it as being disruptive, because if you think about it, we wouldn't have Netflix, we wouldn't have Airbnb, we wouldn't have all these other, Amazon, if they hadn't come into the space to become disruptors. So that's how things happen. With that all said, let's get to our lightning round. Betty, you got our
Wait. So let's. You want to give an explanation of what it is?
Of what? The lightning round?
Yeah,
I'll let you do that. Okay. I'll let you do that.
Okay, so the lightning round, Rashad and Dr. Thomas, is Atiba throws out a question, and then we go around and everybody answers it.
That nobody is supposed to know.
We don't know what
we talked a little bit about it earlier, but they still don't know exactly what I was going to ask specifically. So we got the graphic. I want to say to my co-hosts, you guys want to go first, or you want to let Rashad and Dr. Thomas go? But our question for our lightning round is going to be, what will be the most important issue of next week?
Oh God, next week.
I think Dr. Thomas should go. Dr. Thomas, you go first. I'm over here fan crushing. She check. Dr. Thomas, you go.
I think the whole Jada and August Alsina continues next week.
You think so?
Yes, I do. Those pictures came out of the Johnson. They did a couple of interviews.
What?
I think that continues to be a hot topic next week.
Girl, they trying to be. They talk about being disruptive.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm just saying.
Rashad, what do you think is going to be the most important issue next week?
At this point, given the way that this year is going, man, I don't know. We might just. You ever seen? I'll ever seen. It might just be like I don't know. We might get invaded by aliens, given the way that the world is going. The way everything's happening, it's like it doesn't seem as far fetched at this point.
It doesn't. You're right. All right, who's next?
Yeah,
I'll jump in. Honestly, I think next week we're going to find more of what Florida is doing and Texas is doing wrong. We're going to see their numbers continue to go up for COVID cases. And so at this point, I think those numbers are going to skyrocket. The rest of the country is going to kind of settle in. And we're going to start to see that the lines where people are sick. We're going to start to see that the lines where the people are sick is actually going to be red and blue. By the time this is done, I think by election week, we would see the cases being higher are traditionally places that vote red versus voting blue.
Dr. Thomas's eyes went big because she's right there in the hot spot in Fort Lauderdale.
Well,
Lickadale.
All right, now it's between Seldom and Nayada. Who wants to go next? What's going to be the most important issue next week?
I'll go because I yield to the 5-footer with the roughneck business. I think the most important issue next week is going to be Walmart's slow to react to finally require masks in all their stores. That I think big box retailers have a greater responsibility and role in trying to suppress COVID as best they can. And for them to wait to this particular moment right now is only going to cause more heartache and pain yet to come for a lot of families.
All right, Mayada.
So, you know what? I'm not sure that I even really care. Let me tell you why.
Oh, snap. You got money.
Your birthday's not coming up, so what is it?
My birthday is coming up, but that's next month. That's August.
Oh, that's August.
August.
Okay, Jada. Okay.
August what? Which one?
21st. I'm a Leo Virgo. I'm a Largo.
I'm 26. That's why I was asking.
Okay. All right, Virgo. I see you.
All right.
But no, I'm on vacation next week, so I think I'm just disconnect.
Disconnect.
It's gonna matter.
All right. Well, I'm going to put it there. I think the most important issue next week is going to be parents around the country being upset that school districts are making their children go back to school.
Preach.
The continuation, yeah.
Yep. So it won't be a continuation. I think it's going to be, listening to... Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's going to be a mess, and I think they're going to be... I would not even be surprised to see protests start to emerge. But with that all said,
sorry, go ahead. I was just to say, if you're having a meeting about this, if you're having the PT, like Parent Teachers Association meeting on Zoom, why are you opening the schools? Like, if you're not even having the meeting about the schools inside the damn school, then stay the fuck home.
Yep, I agree 100%. All right. Well, with that said, I want to thank our guests tonight. I want to thank Rashad. I want to thank Dr. Thomas. Thank you all so much for joining us. This has been a great conversation. We would love to have you come back to it with us in the future. That is, if you have fun on our show.
It was a good time.
All right. I mean, I think you imparted some great information, and Rashad, you imparted some great perspective and feedback. And thank you so much for allowing us to share your video on our platform. If you all want to see more of Rashad's work, Rashad, you want to tell them how they can find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on social media at Instagram, rdavis.wav, rdavis.wave. You can find me on Twitter at rdaviswav. R.Davis, R.Davis on all streaming services is where you can find my music. My EP, Dystopia the Prelude, comes out at the end of the month on July 31st. And I'm excited to share it with you. So,
all right. Yeah. And Dr. Thomas, how can our audience find you?
Please listen to my new podcast, The Brain Love Podcast, on Spotify, Apple, Google, on Anchor, of course. And my website is Dr. Delvena, which is DRDELVENA.help, HELP. You can find all of my links there for Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
I love it. What's the name?
All right.
Say that again.
The name of the podcast again?
The Brain Love Podcast.
Love it.
Thank you.
The Brain Love Podcast. All right. Well, I want to thank you all who've been watching us tonight on Facebook Live as we record our Chalkboard Conversations podcast. To those of you who want to see or want to listen to past episodes, you can find us on spikefish.radio. You also can find us on iTunes, Chalkboard Conversations podcast. With that all said, I want to thank my co-hosts, Seldom Seen, Earl, Nayada, for being a part of this and all the hard work that you all do behind the scenes that nobody ever sees. Betty, thank you so much for the engineering. I always joke and say that I'm the talent, but I just joke. Those are just jokes. The whole thing, all of this is like, it's a work and it's a labor of love. And I want to say that it's a wonderful working with all you guys. And so with that all said, we're out. Chalkboard Conversations podcast for this week is a wrap. You have one other thing you want to say?
Yes, we want to thank DJ Paul Howard.
DJ. Well, we thank him, but DJ Paul Howard, you always get us inspired and in the mood, and I felt quite energized with the music this evening. So thank you very much. And
thank you.
If you all in the future, we're going to be moving, just so you all know, we're going to be moving the podcast over to Zoom so that we can play music, because unfortunately, Facebook is now allowing us to play music without being cut off. And that messes up our recording. So With that said, we're going to be doing that. So be looking for that in the next couple of weeks in terms of the links if you want to watch us as we're doing a recording. And we want to encourage you to join our conversations. So with that said, if you want to join our private conversations that go on Chalkboard Conversations, you can find one of us on our social media feeds, and we'll have that and the details and information on our podcast so that you can be invited into our secret group, because you cannot be part of Chalkboard Conversations if you don't know somebody. It's all word of mouth. All right. So that all said, this is a wrap. Thank you so much. Look forward to talking with you again next week, same time, 7 p.m. This is Chalkboard Conversations podcast on spikefish.radio.
Hey, sucker nigga, whoever you are. Hey, sucker nigga, whoever you are. Hey, sucker nigga.
I figured since he was talking about that word today, I'll play some of these.
Hey, good show, guys.
Welcome to the Party Politics Chalkboard Conversations after party.
I'll be making the MCs and the sucker niggas.
Come on.
Like they hard when we damn hard. What's your figure? Round wise, I do the figure.